One of my neighbors who worked in a steel mill made a decision to become an attorney. And what's amazing about that, it wasn't until years later that I realized how that one decision completely transformed his life. Now, to give you some context to this, I lived in a middle-class neighborhood in Indiana. It was on a dead-end street, and the home directly across from us was the biggest house in the neighborhood, which was a little bit odd because it really stood out among all the other normal-sized homes. And the reason this home was so large, the general contractor that built the entire neighborhood built this home for himself and had never moved into it. Years later, an attorney moves into this home, and I was in my teens at the time, and they were in their early 30s, or somewhere around that, early 30s. And unfortunately, I was 16 years old, and my dad had passed away from pancreatic cancer. And this attorney, took me under his wing and was, did his best to help me out. I remember him reaching out and asking, I think he had a carpenter that was working for him that was putting up crown molding. And crown molding is that molding that goes between the ceiling and the wall, and it goes at an angle. It's real decorative and fancy. And this carpenter was putting this in various rooms in his home, and it has to be cut just accurately to get the angles right, but you need somebody to hold this. So he'd asked if I did it, and I had never even had a job at the time. I was a little intimidated, but I said yes, and it worked out. All I had to do is this, right? I mean, how hard could it be? But did that, and eventually it led to more jobs. I would mow his lawn, had this huge lawn. I would clean the gutters. The blacktop driveway would need to be sealed. I would seal that. The interior garage floor they wanted painted. I did that. I painted interior rooms. You name it. There were all kind of projects that I would do over that time. Probably the most fun was washing his Porsche and his S-Class Mercedes. But a really, really great figure in my life that looked out for me and was kind of there when unfortunately after my dad had passed. I still remember as though it was yesterday. He would come home from the office, and you'd hear the sound of that Porsche 911. Or no, it was a Porsche 944. It had the big fin on the back, and we've seen that one. And I'd hear the sound of that Porsche pull up, and he would just roll down the window and stop and ask, hey, what do I owe you? How many hours do you have? And I'd give him the hours, and he would just have this big wad of cash and pay me out. But it was a really good, fun experience for several years while I was in high school and then through college. Now, what's interesting about this, several years later, some close friends of mine, I think we were in college at the time, and we went back to Indiana. It's funny because we all went to school together, and then we went back home to visit friends and family, and it's the same group of people. But we were at a TGI Fridays. Now, back then in our small Indiana town, the only place you could really go was the mall in Olive Garden. That was the only options we had. But now there was this new TGI Fridays with a bar, and everybody would go to this place. So we're sitting in there having a great time, and something must have come up. I must have mentioned one of these projects that I was working on for my attorney neighbor, and a complete stranger sitting there to my left asks, hey, are you talking about, we'll say Mr. Smith? Are you talking about the attorney, Mr. Smith? And I said, oh, yeah, Mr. Smith, yeah, the attorney. And everybody referred to him as first name, last name, Mr. Smith, right? And he says, well, is his first name Mark? And I said, yeah, actually, yeah, that's who it is. It's Mark Smith, the attorney. Now, I would imagine in every town, even like it is here in Las Vegas, you have a handful of very, I will say, famous or well-known, well-advertised attorneys everywhere. Back then, we didn't have all the billboards and commercials and things like that. But this attorney was in that elite top tier of attorneys in that area. So this person, it wasn't maybe surprising that maybe he knew who that was. But then, get this, he says, oh, I remember, Mark, we used to work together in the steel mill. We worked the graveyard shift. So they worked that midnight shift in the steel mill. And I says, no kidding. And then he says this. He said, I remember the night he said, I'm sick of this. Shh. I'm going to go to law school and become an attorney. He vividly remembered the instant when this person that I worked for made that one decision in his life. And I was just floored. One is pure coincidence. I run into somebody that knew him way back before he was famous, right? You see all these before and after type of things. I don't know if you'd say famous, but successful, let's say. And I thought that was the most wild thing. One, the coincidence of that. But get this. This is the other part that really hit me. Then he asked this. He was like, wow, so you work for him? I said, yeah, I work for him. I do, whatever projects, home improvement projects, handyman, stuff like that, right? And he says, wow. He said, I bet you he has a really nice house. And I was like, yeah, it's pretty, nicest one there. And probably the whole, not only the block, the whole neighborhood. And I bet he has a nice car too, huh? Yeah, got a nice Porsche, Benz, the whole thing. And it just seemed as though he was processing all of this in his mind. Wow, like, hey, I knew this person had the same role I had in this very difficult role in the steel mill. I don't know if you've ever met anyone or you worked in a steel mill. I did construction for some time and we worked in a steel mill, and it's dangerous. It's really super hot depending on where you are. I remember in the morning, people coming out when their shift ended at 7 in the morning, and they looked like they'd been through a battle, just covered head to toe, just black soot, right? So not an easy job by any means. But you could see this person looking back, probably thinking of his friend and where he is now, and just trying to put the pieces together like, man, that's unbelievable. And maybe thinking about his own life. I don't know that, but maybe thinking about his own life. I don't know what his current role was or if he stood in that profession or not. But think about that. One decision can change the entire trajectory of your life. I mean, night and day. And what this friend of mine did, he had worked in that steel mill and then took a train into Chicago and went to law school and grinded that out. Probably had no sleep for who knows how many years and made it happen. So think about that. What is the one decision in your life that you may be postponing that can change the entire trajectory of your life? Thanks again. Have an amazing day, and we'll talk soon.